Actress and wife of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Cheryl Hines, got into a testy exchange with Sonny Hostin during her appearance on The View on Tuesday. Hines was on The View to discuss her new memoir, Unscripted. But, of course, the subject of her husband came up. Let's listen.
Your husband is the least qualified Department of Health and Human Services head that we've had in history.
I do not.
I think that's a very dangerous.
Why is he less qualified than an economist?
I think that he possible? Is less qualified.
He has spent his career studying toxins, studying people's health, fighting for one guy who was using Roundup for his job.
He has also spread a lot of misinformation, a lot of chaos.
Kennedy has been in the news recently over his efforts to find potential causes of autism. And most recently, Kennedy stated during a cabinet meeting that there were 2 studies that show children who are circumcised early have double the rate of autism. He said that it's likely because they are given Tylenol in the process of healing from those circumcisions. Here's some more of Hines and Hostin's exchange.
We could go back to COVID when...
He's connecting circumcision to autism.
May I finish?
Please.
When people, Fauci, people were saying when you get the vaccine, you cannot transmit COVID. It will stop COVID. And that was disinformation, misinformation.
We were also still learning about it. It was a novel virus we've never encountered before.
Right.
Because now the doctors will acknowledge that
and Dr. Fauci has a medical degree.
Many experts, of course, disagree with Kennedy's suggestions. Founder and medical director of Ocean Pediatrics, Dr. Stephen Abelowitz, told CBS News, quote, "The conclusion by any credible medical resource is agreeing that there is no causal relationship between Tylenol, circumcisions, or vaccines to autism." Well, I did not expect to be discussing circumcisions with you today, this morning, Amber, but here we are. And Cheryl Hines going on The View. Look, I mean, I've been critical of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. numerous times. I think, although some of his viewpoints regarding, for example, additives in food and so on, I've sympathy for. I do think he has propagated pretty misleading theories about vaccines and autism. And I don't have a whole lot of time for him. I think Cheryl Hines going on The View, good for her. I know she has a book to sell, but she also knew she was entering hostile territory there. And so it proved. What do you make of it all?
It's really interesting. I always find it fascinating in terms of what people expect spouses of political figures to say exactly. Right. Like, do they think that she's going to go on The View and disavow her husband?
Right.
If so, they have a very sad view of marriage, I think. But I think she did a good job. She was obviously prepared. She was willing to have that debate with them. She didn't, say, like, I'm not going to talk about my husband's work. She was willing to go there, which I think is really kudos to her. She hasn't spoken much publicly about his tenure at HHS. It was nice to see her defend him. And I think it was interesting when Sonny immediately starts with this pretty hefty accusation that RFK is the least qualified HHS secretary in history. And she goes, well, was an economist more qualified? Or I think the previous one was an attorney. So it was kind of like, what are you talking about, lady?
Yeah, I mean, the Economist thing, just in terms of debate, the Economist response was a good rejoinder. It refers to an Obama-era HHS secretary,
and then
I think.
The Cara was, his entire career was a lawyer.
Okay, so that's a fair point to make. I think also just in terms of the mechanics of debate, going at her on the basis of RFK Jr.'s qualifications, I mean, that's not even the tack I would take if I was trying to do an adversarial interview with Cheryl Hines, because I think the issue is what RFK Jr. believes, what he has propagated, whether those beliefs hold up. I'm generally skeptical of arguments about qualification for political office. It's like when people talk about, in presidential races, well, is he or she qualified to be president? Like, what job actually qualifies you to be president? That seems a highly dubious maneuver. And even to put sort of partisan questions aside, whenever Hillary Clinton ran against Barack Obama for the Democratic nomination in 2008, he was much less qualified in the judgment of me and the plurality of Democratic voters, he was the much better candidate. So that particular criteria for political office, I think, is dubious. I think it's completely valid in things like scientific positions and so on. But to be a cabinet secretary or to run for office, I'm just not so sure about.
Yeah, and I think it gets at this sort of rub between the expert or credentialed class versus a more populist view of politics, which is people who don't have a credential or a specific educational achievement can still be well qualified because they present great ideas or they're able to critically think through problems, and maybe the people who work underneath them are really well qualified experts who can help them execute a vision for the country, which I think is what's happening within HHS. I mean, you'll recall at that announcement about the potential link between Tylenol and autism, that standing around RFK Jr., who himself is not a doctor, were Dr. Marty McCary, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, and Dr. Mehmet Oz, who are all very well qualified and really leaders in their field. And I know
I'm smirking about Dr. Oz because of the pushing of dubious cures, but Bhattacharya,
I understand his television show was not the ideal, but he did have a very accomplished medical career before that. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya was at Stanford, Dr. Marty McCary was at Johns Hopkins. They were both incredibly well respected, and the only reason that people sneer at them now is because in Dr. Bhattacharya's case, he signed on to the Great Barrington Declaration. Dr. Marty McCary also raised questions about the COVID pandemic response, and so they were sort of cast out as doctors that were right-wing or were politicizing medicine, when really they were asking legitimate questions, I think, about what the government was doing in terms of its public health reaction to COVID, and otherwise nobody would have ever questioned their credentials.
The Barrington Declaration, I think, is an interesting debate in and of itself. I do think that it was part of a valid debate. I think there were real dangers to what the people who signed up to that were proposing, but that'll get us down the COVID rabbit hole again, and we'll be there for for quite a long time. I think that the fear that people like myself and other skeptics of RFK have is the idea that he is prone to deciding the conclusion before looking impartially at the evidence. So things like the Tylenol or the circumcisions, or even the idea that a cause for autism will be found within a certain time frame. I think those kind of conditions raise pretty serious questions about whether this is in fact a good faith, rigorous scientific effort or an effort to reach a preordained conclusion.
Yeah, I have so much more to say.
I know.
I wish we had more time. All right,
yeah.
Instagram has a new setting for teenagers that it hopes will give parents a better idea of what their kids are seeing on the app. We'll be right back with more about that after this.